Hey everybody, thanks for joining me. Today I would like to discuss the metal band Tombs. Tombs formed in 2007 in New York, and they have released 6 albums up to this point, the most recent being Feral Darkness, released in October 2025, earlier this month. The release of this album, combined with Tombs being overall a great band for fall listening, is why we're here today. And they are a difficult band to pigeonhole, so we'll talk about the changes in their sound as we go from album to album. A bit more about the band, guitarist and vocalist Mike Hill. He pretty much is the band. There's been a million lineup changes. He's the songwriter, the band figurehead, all that stuff. And although I got into this stuff after I discovered Tombs, gonna look at a couple other old projects that Mike had, one being Anodyne, Lifetime of Grey Skies, On Level Plane. Maybe a lazy comparison, but maybe easy comparison would be Dillinger Escape Plan, just chaotic, angular, noisy hardcore. Following the breakup of Anodyne, and before the formation of Tombs, there was this short-lived project for Soma, who released one EP, Life During Wartime on Robotic Empire, and that would be it. The other guy in this band, I think he was from a band called Lit Golden Sky, and then went on to form a band called Gods and Queens, named after the first song on here. I remember I did an online MP3 purchase of that album, Gods and Queens, but after that, I have no idea what happened to him. This is definitely different from Anodyne. It's kind of more emotional and maybe like emo influence, but still like chaotic, noisy, hardcore stuff. But something I probably listen to more often than I would Anodyne. What else about the band? I first discovered them around the time of Winter Hours. Before the release of that album, I saw them live, opening for ISIS during ISIS's last trip through Toronto. I totally dug their set, but I didn't buy anything at the show or anything. It wouldn't be too long after that Winter Hours would come out, and I was looking online, and just some people who I really respected had some good things to say about it, so I bought Winter Hours, and I've been a fan ever since. Earlier in their career, I saw Tombs live probably 5-6 times over the course of about 2 years, and it's probably been like, even though I'm still a fan, probably been more than a decade since I've seen them. But life changes, back then I didn't have kids, now I got 3 of them. The band doesn't tour near as much. The whole COVID thing made, there's less tours, I find. Everything's just different now, but I totally hope to see them next time they come through town, because I think this new album rips. And Mike's also had a couple of podcasts been going on for a long time. Everything Went Black. I think that's podcast has been going on for like 15 years now. Listen to pretty much every episode. He's got Necromaniacs podcast, which is a horror movie based podcast, which I've also listened to that since the beginning. It's been at least several years, I'd say. And so I almost feel like I know the guy, and big fan of the band, and just a band I've always kind of considered one of my bands, But there's been some times where I've kind of lost my enthusiasm for the band a bit, and we'll talk about all that as we go through the albums one by one. So let's start off with my 6th and last place pick, an album that I think many fans, and definitely Mike Hill himself, would agree with. The Grand Annihilation, the 4th album from 2017. This was a step up to the big leagues, label-wise. Their one and only album with Metal Blade. This is produced by Eric Rutan. It's not bad, but it just feels like a collection of songs and not a special album. I also feel like this album is most deserving of the label that I think people unjustly give Tombs, which is hardcore meets black metal. Overall, I don't think it's a great comparison, or sorry, a great way to describe the band, but most closely on this album. However, there's some cool tracks on here. The first song, Black Sun Horizon, definitely very different from Tombs. It's like the most metal song that Tombs have ever released, if you ask me. Again, a bit different. It's like a violent, fast, melodic black metal kind of track. Bring to mind something like Dissection. I also really like November Wolves. Again, hitting that hardcore meets black metal sound. Number 5, Under Sullen Skies, the 5th album from 2020, released on Season of Mist. I like this album a lot better than The Grand Annihilation. However, it did not stay in rotation very long, so that's my main thing I hold against it. It might not be as playable as everything else I'm going to discuss from here on out. The post-punk influences that came into the fold a couple albums before this is extremely apparent on here, definitely front and center. My favorite tracks on here are probably Barren, which is a real black metal oriented number with a 6 solo that might be the only solo in the Tombs catalog, but then it comes back around to having like a really emotional and even uplifting ending to the song. I also really like The Hunger, which is like New York hardcore meets Danzig werewolf song. Pretty awesome. Number 4, Savage Gold, the 3rd album from 2014, released on Relapse Records. When this album came out, I was a massive fan of the band. They were like one of my favorite bands. And this started a bit of a decrease in enthusiasm for the band, if I'm being honest. I liked it, but it didn't stick with me, kind of like Under Sullen Skies. But don't take that the wrong way. These last several years, I've really come back around to Savage Gold. One thing I really like about it is that it's one of the most varied albums they've done. This is when the post-punk sound first started really emerging. And those are the songs like I kind of like best. Echoes, Death Tripper, Edge of Darkness. Basically the middle of the album here. I forget what song it was, but I was listening to this the other day, and there was one passage on there that really brought to mind Aventern, another New York metal band that I took a look at not too long ago. And I really didn't know. Just out of curiosity, I looked at Metal Archives and looked at the lineup for Tombs, Savage Gold, and one of the main guys in Aventern was part of this album. So I gotta imagine that he played a little bit of influence on the songwriting there. Could be wrong about that, but yeah, I really had no idea, and I was like, wow, like that was Aventern before Aventern. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So yeah, Savage Gold, that's my number 4. Number 3, Path of Totality, the 2nd album from 2011, also on Relapse. Take a look at my vinyl copy. I bought that, I think, the 2nd time I ever saw them live. It's a double, kind of a gray and black vinyl. So this album here, probably their biggest album. The most obvious detail would be that 2011, this was Decibel Magazine's album of the year. I also feel like they did most of their touring here. I found they were at their biggest during Path of Totality. This is also the most black metal thing they put out. My complaints is that as much as I consider this album a masterpiece when it came out, I do find it a little samey and a little meandering in places. However, definitely a pretty sick release, and my favorite track is Cold Dark Eyes, a very cathartic track that brings to mind winter hours. So, time for the top two. My number two is going to be Winter Hours, the debut album from 2009. This is definitely a little different than from what's to come, although I hate to use the term. To me, this is the most post-metal thing they've done, but it's emphasizing the metal in post-metal. It's just extremely emotional, but also very dark. Just a very, very powerful release. Favorite tracks on here, it's got to be Gossamer. I imagine that's a fan favorite track. The Great Silence, and Merrimack. So that's, leaving out something very obvious from my countdown so far. My number one is the new album. I'm just being honest. I really do think this is the best thing they put out. It was a close call between these two. I do admit that this is a more sentimental, emotional album. Kind of gives me the feels a bit more. But I think this is the one that has the most variety. I think pound for pound, the most amount of awesome songs. And just something I just know I'm going to listen to more than anything else the band has put out up to now. I've only had this album for, I guess, about 2.5 weeks. I don't know why, but I got my copy a full week before release date. I got mine in the mail. So I've listened to this for pretty much 2 weeks straight. Haven't gotten bored of it yet. This is on Redefining Darkness Records. And I'm just going to spend a little bit of time going through the track listing because I think this album rules. Glass Eyes, Ghoul. Well, okay, I'm going to talk about the first three together. That song, along with Feral Darkness and Granite Sky, these are not my favorite songs on the album, but a very pronounced death metal influence that I didn't detect on the albums that came beforehand. Fourth track, The Sun Sets. Now we're talking. This is probably my favorite song on here. Huge Neurosis influence. And I'm not saying like they lifted it, but like the song's called The Sun Sets, and it reminds me a lot of A Sun That Never Sets by Neurosis. Mike himself would tell you he is a huge Neurosis fan. But it's like all the things you love about Neurosis, but kind of streamlined and simplified, and the song's like not that long, but it's just huge and emotional. And I remember I was listening to that song in the car with my son, and usually, he's kind of more into, Kiss, Ghost, Metallica. But that song, he was definitely vibing to that one. And that's on like a playlist of some of my favorite songs right now. I think it's awesome. 5, Last Days. I love it. Sounds like a little bit more of a typical Tomb song. Number 6, The Wintering. Getting back into that death metal a bit more, but I'm even hearing a little bit of like war metal, a grindcore sound I never heard before, something new. Black Shapes, showing more of their black metal influence. That's kind of a Cool, creepy song. This kind of, I don't know if it's like a background vocal or like a sound effect that's going on throughout it, but I really like that. I thought it was great for Halloween. Again, we're just a couple days from Halloween as I speak right now. But then there's also some kind of like revenge, like mid-paced revenge riffs in there. Very different from Tombs beforehand, but very awesome. Nightland, that is my second favorite song off this release. Biggest influence to me on here is Yob, so definitely a very doomy sound. The female vocals on here actually remind me of the male vocals on Yob. And I should mention, I mean, this whole album sounds massive, but that guitar sound on Nightland near the end, it's like usually like that simple of a riff isn't really working for me, but it just sounds crushing and I love it. Number 9, Wasps. Fast banger of a song, bringing you to the outro, Glaken, which is a soundscape, ambient style outro, but it's just kind of nice and textured and creepy. I think it's a good way to end the album. I think this is really the best thing that Tombs has ever done. Check it out if you haven't. Thanks for watching. See you next time.